When we first arrived in town, Coal Valley was rocked to its core, but now, due to Henry Gowen, everyone can sleep a little easier. For the men who died in the mining catastrophe, Henry has worn the crown. They trusted him to do what was good for the community, since he was one of them. But it's not simple to expose a corporation where you work, and it's even more difficult to make changes when your cries go unheard. During season 9 of When Calls the Heart, we saw Henry struggle like hard to ensure that the mine didn't reopen, and that if it did, all safety procedures were done. But the guys in charge had not changed, and Henry's only option for ending the town's misery was to blow it up. Season 9 of When Calls the Heart came to an end on Sunday night with a jam-packed episode that saw huge events for Lucas, Elizabeth, Rosemary, Lee, and the rest of Hope Valley. Here's what happened in the Hallmark Channel series' season finale, from an engagement to baby news to a terrible fire. Lucas left town last week to clear his head, leaving a note for Elizabeth behind. She had been concerned that he was reconsidering their relationship earlier. She doesn't even need to read his letter now that her worries have been dispelled, thanks in part to their passionate declarations to each other at the close of episode 11. Elizabeth seems unconcerned about Lucas's departure, but his cousin Gustav is concerned. She agrees to send Nathan out to check on Lucas, who is chopping firewood in the woods and reading Henry David Thoreau. Nathan camps out with his old opponent, the Mountie and the saloonkeeper, in what may be their most friendly chat yet. It appears that these two are developing a true friendship. Henry Gowen departed Hope Valley last week after intentionally sparking an explosion that caused the mine to collapse. His time on the run, though, is brief. He's sent back to Hope Valley by a pair of Mounties who hail him as a hero for his efforts to keep the mine from reopening. To Bill's dismay, Gowen freely handed himself in. However, the businessman is willing to accept the consequences of his actions. And he isn't looking for accolades for it. He convinces Elizabeth to disprove Rosemary's account of his deeds. Gowen prays to God for guidance in the future. He gives the church a hefty but anonymous contribution. And when Joseph makes a jailhouse visit, Gowen asks him to show him how to pray. In this episode, Gowen isn't the only one who returns to Hope Valley. In Chicago, May Sue appears to have cleansed her name. Is this the start of a relationship between her and Nathan? Perhaps. But there's also the issue of faith to consider. She tells Molly that she's starting to have feelings for Nathan. But she doesn't feel she can act on them because he was her patient, a rule that would seem to rule out having a relationship with anyone in Hope Valley, given that she is the only doctor. It's unclear whether Nathan had romantic affections for Faith or May at this time. Allie, his daughter, wants him to make a decision. She informs Elizabeth that she is ready for her father to marry. Rosemary has long suspected she is expecting a child. She can't just go to the drugstore and get a pregnancy test, unfortunately. Part of her doesn't want to know if she's expecting since she'll have to cope with the disappointment if she isn't. Elizabeth eventually persuades her to speak with Faith, who explains the pregnancy symptoms. Rosemary has kept her major news hidden from her husband, but she knows she must tell Lee the truth. Rosemary notices a flutter in her stomach one morning and realizes she's expecting. She tells Lee the exciting news, and he can't contain his excitement once he knows what's going on. He's out on the street in his pajamas moments later, informing all of his neighbors. The season finale of When Calls the Heart isn't all pleasant news. A fire breaks out at the Queen of Hearts, causing terror across the community. Thankfully, no one is gravely injured, thanks in large part to Hickham's decision to retire as mayor. The saloon, however, is completely demolished. Lucas has an uncertain future, at least in terms of his profession, as a result of this and the sale of his oil company interests. Another person with an uncertain future? Avery, Bill. He's finally realized that he must prioritize his health. He informs Elizabeth that he's getting his affairs in order before traveling to Union City for treatment. Bill maintains he's not leaving anytime soon, but this is a depressing turn of events for the judge of Hope Valley. In this episode, Joseph is also at a fork in the path. He wants to show that he can succeed as a business owner on his own. When Lee discreetly intervened to get him alone, he became irritated. It also caused him to turn down Minnie's father's offer of assistance. Minnie proves to be the cool voice of reason once more. She gently explains the distinction between self-respect and stubborn pride to Joseph. He agrees to speak with her father about forming a partnership. The season has seen Lucas and Elizabeth's relationship become stronger. There was never any doubt that they would marry. The only question was when Lucas would pop the question. Any doubt he had stemmed from his own guilt over placing Elizabeth and her son in risk due to the Walden situation and his role in the mine's possible reactivation. However, when he returns from his camping trip, Elizabeth promises him that she would never mistrust him, and he agrees. That sets the tone for the most important scene in this episode. He and Elizabeth are out walking with little Jack, Highland Goodrich, who is collecting rocks to give to the adults. But one of those rocks is different from the rest. Little Jack hands Elizabeth something as Lucas informs her that he's contacted her father to ask for her hand in marriage. It's an engagement ring, of course. Elizabeth, I've never been more sure that you're the one that matters. And I know that you're the one that I will love forever, he says before getting down on one knee. Allow me to be a father to your son, he says. Elizabeth, will you marry me? Elizabeth says yes, of course, much to the delight of little Jack, who couldn't be prouder of the role he played in the proposal. There's lots to look forward to in a hypothetical When Calls the Heart Season 10, with Elizabeth and Lucas engaged and Rosemary and Lee expecting their first child. There are also a few unresolved issues that could affect future episodes. As a result of his mine sabotage, Goen is facing substantial prison time. Bill has stated that he will do everything possible to assist him, but Goen appears to have accepted his fate. There's also Faith, May, and Nathan's developing love triangle. Then there's Molly and Bill to consider. She drove him to his doctor's appointment and had some exciting news to share with Faith when she returned. Could Bill and Molly have finally moved on from flirtation to something more serious, as the episode didn't reveal? It's a distinct possibility now that Bill is facing his own mortality. Fans will have to wait and see what happens next for the residents of Hope Valley.